It's my birthday today, and I wake up real early in the morning to come out on this hike this morning. Just pulled off on the side of the road because I saw this really beautiful spot, and just thinking about the ways that like my life transforms, right? Like year by year, I come to these new places, right? Like I don't really like to celebrate birthdays because I just feel like it's strange to mark time in such a way that we are aging, right, instead of just maturing, which happens in spurts that are maybe not measurable in moon cycles, right? Like, and how do we grow and how do we evolve and how do we measure that? And it shouldn't necessarily be in the days of the year, but rather in the ways that we come into new ways of understanding life. There's this concept that I think about a lot, right? Is about like the prison of the mind, which was something that I really started to think about a lot when I was doing the prison programming, because I started to realize that the mind is actually where we're trapped. It's not so much that we're locked in cages and boxes. We're locked in ways of thinking, right? Like we think that we're aging according to a calendar, when really we're aging according to our life experiences, and we're aging according to the wisdom that we're acquiring. And how do we age gracefully, which I think is like the most beautiful part of being a human, and part of this experience is that we get to age in ways that we choose. You know, we can have these relationships with aging that are harmful to us, or we can have these relationships to aging that are really beautiful, right? Like we worry about, you know, our aging skin or our hair or whatever it is that we worry about in regards to getting older, but those are really the beautiful things because they mark the time that we've spent learning, that we've spent growing. When we start to unlock the ways that we're trapped, right? The ways that we're trapped in cycles of thinking. I think that that's really the work that all of us should be working on, because in doing that work, then we start to really evolve and age gracefully in ways that are most beneficial to ourselves. And when we are aging in such a way that's beneficial to ourselves, we're beneficial to everybody around us. And I think that that's, to me at least, a big part of the human experience is like, how do we benefit one another, right? How do we make this the most harmonious experience that we could have? You know, I sit here in nature and I spend a lot of time out in nature, right? Because I feel like that's like the exact opposite of the prison work. Even though I can find myself in as much of a prison out here as I am inside of actual physical prison, because once I start thinking in circles and looping around with thoughts that are probably not even my own thoughts, but rather just contemplations of ideas that somebody or something else shared with me, then I realized that I'm not really thinking in a very free way, that I'm thinking in the way that I was taught to think, and I'm thinking in a way that other people are, you know, influencing me to think like. And when we really start to contemplate what that is, and how our thoughts and our thinking are not necessarily our own, and how we can trace our thoughts back to the origins of where we acquired them, but then once we move past that, it becomes really, really hard to understand where ideas and thoughts are coming from, because they are part of the social human experience, and they're being shared, and they're being you know, elaborated upon as each of us takes upon the story in ourselves, and then shares that story or shares that information. The story evolves and changes, and where it started and where it's ending is a completely different place. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing about information, is that it too has a life of its own, and it ages in its ways. And if we don't apply our wisdom and our experience to it, and our understanding of how to age gracefully to the ideas that we're sharing, then those ideas themselves are going to age in very, you know, toxic and ways that are not in harmony with the world around us. I look at all of this nature all around me and how it just exists, right? It's just flowing. This river next to me is flowing, and it's allowing life to happen and unfold. And it's not worried about yesterdays or tomorrows. It's just here right now. And I think that that's the way that we should all be living, honestly, is that we should just be here now. Like, that's obviously very cliche, but it's very true, because if we start to think in yesterdays and we think in tomorrows, then we're creating a psychological prison for ourselves. And within that prison, we're trapped, right? We are under control of somebody else's way of thinking. And when people start to understand how to control people's thinking, they can control every one of your actions. They can predict exactly what you're going to do. You know, you see this a lot in business and marketing, and especially in politics and religion. People understand this. There's a science behind it. Earlier, in the middle of last year, I took a class at Massachusetts Institute of Technology online called Persuasive Communication. And this is a science. This is something that people have really studied and perfected over the millennia, right? Like, starting with rhetoric all the way to where we're at now with these online videos. Like, people can influence you. They can, if they can get your attention, then they can access the deeper parts of your mind, and they can change your behavior without you knowing it. And most of your behaviors, most of our behaviors, they're not our natural behaviors. They're being influenced by people that know how to influence our behaviors. So when we think that we're taking action by getting all worked up about some political point of view that we saw on television, there is a scientist behind those methodologies that are actually changing the way that you're thinking. You're doing exactly what they want you to do. You think that you're reacting and that you're being rebellious and that you're going against the status quo, but in reality, you are doing exactly what they expect you to do, right? We as humans are very predictable, right? We fall into categories of thinking, and once you're in that category of thinking, once you're consumed by that hive mind and fully immersed in that group think, they know exactly what you're going to do. You might think that you're going against what they're saying by rebelling and lashing out, but that's exactly what they're planning on you doing. And in doing that, you're not paying attention to the other things that they don't want you to be paying attention to. So, you know, I think that that's how we start to unravel these psychological prisons, as being very aware of where our information is coming from, the ways that we're processing them, the way that we're identifying with them, and then how we're letting go of those ideas and expressing these ideas either in meaningful ways or just letting them go because they're meaningless. And I find that most things in life are actually meaningless. You know, you look at social media and everybody's so worked up about this thing or that thing or some war or some political stance. And I do understand that, but at the same time, you're not doing anything about it. You're literally just letting this idea consume your mind. And in that consumption, you're being a very ineffective member of your community because you're completely ignoring the things that are actually present in your life. Right? As the river flows past, not worried about yesterday's or tomorrow's. Well, a lot of this information that we're receiving is just yesterday's and tomorrow's and hypotheticals that probably never even happen. And day by day, we get presented with some new hypothetical situation that might lead to disaster, but so far in our lives has very rarely led to any sort of disaster. And I think about that a lot. And how do we come to understand and how do we come to unlock these psychological prisons and get free in our ways of thinking so that we can live the lives we're meant to live through our own psychology instead of being influenced by emotion, by psychological chemistry, by neurochemistry, right? Like, how do we move past that, have an understanding of that, and just be love? Right? Be here now and be in love, because once we take that stance, then we become free. And that's dangerous, and you might, face consequences in itself by doing those things because that's true disobedience, right? Because if you're just filled with love and you're just present in the moment, you realize that you have personal power. And as long as they have you trapped in ideas that happened yesterday or somewhere in the future, you're trapped in a psychological prison. So this has been an aspect of the work that I've been developing for, almost a decade now, right? Like this was what I started to learn working in the prison. An aspect of it, right, is like it's psychological. To be trapped in a prison isn't physical as much as it is psychological, and all of us are trapped psychologically, right? Like there's just as Asada Shakur said, like, right, we're all in prison. There's just minimum security and maximum security, right? And most of us are out here watching YouTube videos or in minimum security prison, whether we want to admit it or not. And the ways that we get free from those prisons is to start to free our minds, right? To really wake up and really look at the things that are affecting us and look at the things that we are affecting and let go of these hypotheticals and get into a more realistic frame of mind where we can be effective. In my latest book, right, my latest workbook and course that I'm developing, The Escape Plan, right, it goes through these levels of understanding the psychological prison, right? At least my experience of it, right? But I find it to be really valuable. And it really leads all back to the way that we're processing our thinking, right? Are we getting trapped in our thoughts, or are we using those thoughts to build things? And I've found over my career that the most effective thing that I can use to process my thinking is a journal, right? So I have a very extensive journaling practice, which is something that I think every human being should have to some degree or another, whether it's an audio journal like this sort of is, or a written journal, or art journals. I think that that's the way that we process thinking. And once we unravel thinking and we really think about it in a way that's expansive, that's looking for multiple perspectives, right? Not just being like, I'm right, I'm a liberal, I'm a Republican, I'm correct, or I'm Christian or Muslim and nobody else is correct. Like, you're trapped in a box if you think that way, right? You need to look at it through a Socratic method of thinking, where it's like, how do you argue the other side's point of view in favor of it, and truly try to understand other people's points of view? Then you start to expand your mind, right? You start to have an expansive way of thinking. And usually if you do that, you find neutrality, where it's like, okay, they have these thought forms, they as we other people, right? We make them seem as if they're less than us because they think different thoughts than us, which is it's so erratic. It's not useful to do that, right? Like, what we need to do is be like, what's their point of view? What's their perspective? Let me widen my perception so that I can have a greater understanding of what's happening in conscious reality. And instead of being filled with hate, I can be filled with love and accept these people and accept their points of view and try to make decisions that are better for all, instead of this conflict that we see all around us. So check out the link down below or on my website, and check out my new book, right? It's pretty fascinating. It's based on my years of prison experience, and it's a really interesting journal or practice, or just a little workbook that you can go through that helps you to understand the ways that you can unlock your own psychological prisons. Also, I hope that you all have a beautiful day and it's filled with peace and love, and that you guys get to find beautiful places such as this where I'm at today, and that you get to share some love with your loved ones and be present and find a sense of community and fill that community with love.